You're scrolling through your banking app on a Sunday evening, and there's $3,200 sitting in your checking account. It's more than you usually have. Maybe you got a bonus. Maybe you've been disciplined with spending. Either way, you're looking at this number and thinking, I should do something with this. So you start researching index funds, crypto, individual stocks, real estate crowdfunding. Everyone online has an opinion, and they all sound confident. And somewhere in the middle of comparing expense ratios and watching YouTube videos about technical analysis, you realize you have no idea what you're actually supposed to do first. My name is Anderson, and I've spent years studying not just what people invest in, but when they invest in it and how that sequence determines whether they build wealth or just stay busy. And here's what most people get wrong. They treat investing like a menu at a restaurant. They pick what sounds interesting and hope it works out. But investing isn't a menu, it's a staircase. And if you try to skip steps, you don't get to the top faster, you just fall. There's an optimal order to all of this, a sequence that's been mathematically proven to maximize returns while minimizing risk. But almost nobody follows it because the correct order isn't exciting. It doesn't make for good social media content. It doesn't let you brag about buying Tesla at the right time. It just works, quietly, consistently, over decades. And today, I'm going to show you exactly what that order is. Let's start with the step that makes people groan, the emergency fund. I know you want to hear about investments that could double in value. But here's the thing, without an emergency fund, you're not really investing. You're gambling with money you can't afford to lose. An emergency fund isn't about preparing for disasters, it's about creating the psychological space to make good decisions. Because here's what happens without one. Your car needs $1,200 in repairs. You don't have it. So you either sell your investments at a loss or put it on a credit card at 24% interest. Either way, you've just undone months of investing progress. The emergency fund is what keeps you in the game when life shows up uninvited. Now, the typical advice is 3 to 6 months of expenses, which is about as helpful as saying somewhere between short and tall. Here's a better framework. Start with $2,000. That covers most immediate emergencies and gives you enough breathing room to think clearly when something breaks. Then build toward 1 month of expenses, then 3 months. The goal isn't to hit some arbitrary number. The goal is to reach the point where unexpected expenses stop feeling like emergencies and start feeling like inconveniences. There's actual research showing that people with at least $2,500 saved report significantly lower financial stress than those with nothing, even if their incomes are identical. It's not about the amount. It's about the buffer, the space between you and catastrophe. And once you have it, something shifts. You stop making decisions out of fear. You start making them out of strategy. Here's the part people really don't want to hear. If you're carrying high-interest debt, you shouldn't be investing at all. You should be destroying that debt with extreme prejudice. And I'm not talking about your mortgage or student loans at 4%. I'm talking about credit card debt at 22%, personal loans at 18%. Anything above 8 to 10% is a financial emergency, masquerading as normal. Here's why. If you have $5,000 in credit card debt at 22% interest, that debt is costing you $1,100 a year. Every year, guaranteed. Meanwhile, if you invest $5,000 in the stock market, you might earn 8 to 10% annually on average. Some years you'll lose money, some years you'll gain. But the debt is certain. It grows whether the market is up or down. It compounds against you while you sleep. Paying off 22% debt is mathematically equivalent to earning a guaranteed 22% return on an investment. And there is no investment on earth that offers guaranteed 22% returns. None. Anyone promising that is lying or running a scam. So every dollar you put toward that debt is the best investment you can possibly make. Better than real estate, better than stocks, better than anything. Now, here's where people get confused. They think they can invest and pay down debt simultaneously. They want to do both because doing both feels like progress. But it's not progress. It's running on a treadmill. You're putting $200 toward investments while paying $150 in interest on debt. You're moving, but you're not getting anywhere. The math is simple. Eliminate the drain before you try to fill the bucket. There's exactly one exception to the pay off debt first rule, and it's important enough that it changes everything. If your employer offers a retirement plan match, you contribute enough to get the full match before you finish paying off high interest debt. This sounds counterintuitive. Why would you invest while carrying 22% debt? Because employer matching is a 100% immediate return. Think about that. If your employer matches 50 cents on every dollar up to 6% of your salary and you earn $60,000, contributing $3,600 gets you an additional $1,800 from your employer. That's an instant 50% gain before your investments earn anything. Even with 22% debt, a 100% return is better. It's not even close. The strategy is simple. Contribute just enough to capture the full match. Then redirect everything else to crushing debt. Once the debt is gone, you can increase your retirement contributions. But here's the critical part. This only works if you're disciplined about paying down the debt immediately after securing the match. If you use the employer match as an excuse to carry debt longer, you've missed the point entirely. The match is free money, but it's not permission to stay in debt. Once you've built your emergency fund, eliminated high-interest debt, and secured your employer match, you enter what I call the tax optimization phase. And this is where most people make their biggest mistake. They open a taxable brokerage account and start investing. It feels like the right move. You're finally investing. You're building wealth. But you're doing it in the most tax-inefficient way possible. And over decades, that inefficiency costs you tens of thousands of dollars. Here's the better path. Max out your IRA before you put another dollar into your employer's 401k. Why? Because your IRA gives you control. Most employer 401k plans offer a limited selection of funds, often with expense ratios of 0.5 to 1.5%. Your IRA lets you invest in low-cost index funds with expense ratios of 0.03%. That difference might sound small, but over 30 years, a 1% fee difference on a $100,000 portfolio costs you about $60,000 in lost growth. You're essentially funding someone else's retirement with your expense ratios. For 2025, you can contribute $7,000 to an IRA if you're under 50, or $8,000 if you're older. Max that out before you do anything else. Now, you have to choose between traditional and Roth, and this is where people get paralyzed by analysis. Here's the simple version. Traditional IRA contributions reduce your taxable income now, but you pay taxes when you withdraw in retirement. Roth IRA contributions don't reduce your current taxes, but all withdrawals in retirement are tax-free. If you're early in your career and in a low tax bracket, Roth makes sense. You're paying taxes at your lowest rate. If you're at peak earnings and in a high bracket, traditional makes sense. You're deferring taxes until you're in a lower bracket in retirement. Can't decide? Split the difference. Tax diversification is a real thing, and having money in both buckets gives you flexibility later. Here's where things get interesting. If you have access to a health savings account, it might be the single best investment vehicle available, and almost nobody uses it correctly. An HSA offers 3 tax advantages that no other account can match. You get a tax deduction on contributions, your money grows tax-free, and withdrawals for medical expenses are tax-free forever, even in retirement. It's the only triple tax advantaged account that exists. Think about that. No taxes going in, no taxes while it grows, no taxes coming out if you use it for medical expenses. For 2025, you can contribute $4,300 if you have individual coverage, or $8,550 for family coverage. But here's the catch. You need a high deductible health plan to be eligible. And here's the strategy that makes HSAs powerful. Don't use them for current medical expenses. Pay those out of pocket if you can, and let your HSA money stay invested in the market. Save all your medical receipts because there's no time limit on reimbursement. You could pay for a prescription today and reimburse yourself from your HSA 20 years from now, tax-free. After age 65, HSAs become even more flexible. You can withdraw for any purpose, not just medical expenses. You'll pay income tax on non-medical withdrawals, just like a traditional IRA. But medical expenses in retirement are essentially guaranteed, so having a pile of tax-free money specifically for healthcare is like having a financial superpower. Let's run the numbers. If you max out an HSA for 30 years at 7% annual returns, you'd have over $530,000. And if you use it all for medical expenses, which the average retiree will, that's over $500,000 that was never taxed. Compare that to a taxable account where you'd pay taxes on dividends annually and capital gains when you sell. The tax savings alone could be worth $150,000 or more over your lifetime. This is why HSAs are so powerful, but most people either don't have access to them or treat them like checking accounts, spending every dollar as soon as it hits. They're missing the entire point. Once you've maxed your IRA and HSA, you circle back to your employer's 401k and contribute beyond the match. The 2025 limit is $23,500 if you're under 50 or $31,000 if you're older. At this point, you're sheltering serious money from taxes, potentially $35,000 or more annually between your IRA, HSA, and 401k. Most people never reach this point. The average American saves about 5% of their income, which usually doesn't even max out their IRA. So if you're working through this sequence, you're already in the top tier of savers. But here's what's interesting. Even with higher fees, the 401k makes sense at this stage because of the sheer amount you can contribute. The tax advantages outweigh the fee disadvantage, especially if you're in a high tax bracket. And at this level, you're building real wealth, not lottery ticket wealth, not get-rich-quick wealth, but the kind of steady, compounding wealth that turns into 7 figures over a few decades. Only after you've maxed out every tax-advantaged account do you open a taxable brokerage account. This is the step most people want to start with. It's where you have complete freedom, no contribution limits, no withdrawal restrictions, no penalties for taking money out before retirement. But it's also where taxes destroy your returns if you're not careful. Every dividend gets taxed. Every capital gain gets taxed when you sell. It's like trying to fill a bucket while someone pokes holes in it. You can still build wealth, but it's harder than it needs to be. Let me give you the numbers. If you invest $10,000 annually for 30 years in a tax-advantaged account at 7% returns, you end up with about $945,000. In a taxable account with the same return, but paying taxes on dividends and capital gains, you might end up with $720,000. That's a $225,000 difference just from taxes. But here's where taxable accounts shine. Flexibility. If you're saving for a house down payment in 5 years, you need a taxable account. If you want to retire before 59 and a half and need money to bridge the gap, you need a taxable account. If you're building wealth beyond what retirement accounts can hold, you need a taxable account. The key is sequence. Taxable accounts are the last step, not the first. Here's what this sequence actually does. It creates a financial architecture where every dollar is working as hard as it possibly can. Your emergency fund protects you from derailment, eliminating debt stops the bleeding, employer matching captures free money, IRAs minimize fees, HSAs triple dip on tax advantages. 401ks shelter large amounts from taxes, and taxable accounts provide flexibility for everything else. Each step builds on the previous one, each layer reinforces the others, and over time, the structure becomes almost self-sustaining. But most people skip steps. They want the excitement of picking stocks before they've built the foundation. They want the flexibility of taxable accounts before they've maximized tax advantages. They want to invest before they've stopped hemorrhaging money to interest payments. And they wonder why they're not getting ahead. Following this sequence requires something most people don't talk about. It requires becoming a different person. You have to become someone who prioritizes boring efficiency over exciting speculation, someone who delays gratification not for days or weeks, but for decades, someone who trusts the process even when it feels painfully slow. This isn't natural. Humans are wired for immediate rewards. We're built to prioritize today over tomorrow because for most of human history, tomorrow wasn't guaranteed. But wealth building requires rewiring that instinct. It requires treating your future self as real, as deserving of resources and consideration as your current self. And here's the strange thing. Once you make that shift, it becomes easier. The discipline that felt like deprivation starts to feel like design. The sacrifices that felt heavy start to feel strategic. You're not giving things up. You're building something. And that something compounds into options your current self can barely imagine. Let me be honest with you, most people will never follow this sequence. They'll get their emergency fund to $1,000 and then start investing. They'll carry credit card debt while contributing to a 401k. They'll max out taxable accounts before they even know what an HSA is. And they'll still build some wealth. The market is forgiving like that. If you consistently invest over decades, you'll probably end up okay. But okay isn't the goal. The goal is optimal, and optimal has an order. If you're 25 and you follow this sequence, building the emergency fund, eliminating debt, capturing the match, maxing the IRA and HSA, filling the 401k, then finally moving to taxable accounts, you could retire at 55 with over $2 million, maybe more. If you skip steps and just throw money at a taxable brokerage account for 30 years, you might retire at 65 with $800,000, still good, but not optimal. The difference between those two paths is the sequence. That's it. Same effort, same monthly contributions, radically different outcomes. And the best part? You don't need to be a financial genius to follow this order. You just need to be willing to do boring things consistently while everyone else chases excitement. That's the whole secret. That's the entire thing. Build the foundation, eliminate the leaks, optimize for taxes, then and only then expand into flexibility. It's not sexy, but it works. And 30 years from now, when you're looking at a 7-figure portfolio that's throwing off enough passive income to fund your life, you won't care that it wasn't sexy. You'll just be grateful you started at the right step.